Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience this evening as we just clean up a couple of little kinks in our Zoom webinar. I'm Elizabeth Blasius. I'm co-founder and partner of Preservation Futures. And thank you so much for attending the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative webinar for our work within Alexandria and the County of Arlington in Virginia. This webinar is going to be recorded, so if you miss a portion of it or if you'd like to share the webinar with someone else, you'll be able to. I'll be leading this presentation while Jonathan Solomon, my partner in Preservation Futures, assists on the back end. And during this webinar, we ask you to generously use the question and answer feature during the time that we're speaking. We'll be tracking it for general questions about the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative, but we'll also look to the Q&A feature once we get to the mapping portion of our webinar. If you have any additional questions for Jonathan and I or for the team, our emails will be at the end of the presentation. So we're grateful to have on this webinar myself, Jonathan, Aurelia Gracia from the National Park Service. She is the outdoor recreation planner for NPS's Chesapeake Gateways and is the coordinator for the protected lands and public access work groups. Kate Lenzer is Senior GIS Project Manager at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And Luana Holland-Moore is Director of Fellowships and Interpretive Strategies at the National Trust for Historic Preservation's African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. So we can go ahead and get started. If Aurelia is ready to speak, I'm going to hand it off to Aurelia to give a sort of a bit of information on the project. Then I'll give the mic to Kate, and then we'll go right into more information on the project.
Hi, everybody. This is Aurelia Gracia with the National Park Service, Chesapeake Gateways. Sorry, there's a little bit of technical difficulties right now, but I wanted to go ahead and talk more about the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative. But first off, I wanted to acknowledge that Chesapeake Gateways is a National Park Service unit. It's a technical assistance office and grant program that's located in Annapolis, Maryland. It specifically focuses on providing technical assistance support to communities and organizations that focus on preserving natural, cultural, and recreational resources throughout the watershed. So the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative is a perfect example of our technical assistance work. This project is truly a collaborative project, and it wouldn't be successful with a lot of our partners and the communities that are involved in it. But the purpose of the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative, it's aimed to identify but also preserve historic and cultural resources that are important to African American and Black communities throughout the watershed. And so through this project work, you'll be hearing from more of the collaborators that have been supporting this work. But what we're truly aiming to do is identify, preserve, and protect, and also, document these sites to lay a foundation for historical resources within the watershed. And so by doing that, we're hoping that we're able to kind of see what's currently out there, maybe identify resources that have been previously missed from the historical record, but then also find ways to explore future areas and resources. So next slide. And then I just want to acknowledge, like I said, this project is truly a collaborative project. We do a lot of work with the states, the state historical preservation offices, but then also local nonprofits. And some of our major partners that are helping support this work is the National Trust for Historic Preservation's African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, the states of Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, which are also the pilot sites for this project, the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, and Preservation Futures.
Elizabeth, I think you are on mute if you were communicating.
Oh, thank you. I sure was on mute. My goodness. Now I'd like to invite the National Trust to talk a little bit about their their part of the project.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Luana Holland-Moore, Director of Fellowships and Interpretive Strategies for the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund is the largest preservation effort ever undertaken on behalf of African American historic sites of activism, achievement, and resilience. And our involvement is because it was very important to us to be able to identify and map African American historic resources within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And through this research, to be able to develop best practices and engage the communities. Phase one started in, I believe it was actually 2023, with pilot projects in Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. And phase two, which is happening now, is crowdsourcing pilot projects in Virginia, Maryland, and this time also in Delaware. Next slide, please. Why is this initiative needed? 10% of National Register and National Historic Landmark nominations reflect stories of underrepresented communities. And this lack of data leads to lack of prioritization and funding, and also less engagement with conservation and preservation communities with communities of color. And one thing that we found, for instance, that when this does not happen, this is how loss occurs. And some of the participants in this project actually said to the researchers, oh, you're already 5-10 years too late, which underscores that need to be able to recognize, identify, and bring awareness to these sites. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kate Linzer.
Hey. Yep, I was on mute that time. Sorry about that. So if you could just go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you so much. So as you heard from Luana and Aurelia, the project is now in its second phase, but I did just want to take a minute to share some of the outcomes from the first phase. So in terms of numbers, there were a total of 210 sites that were added to the data inventory systems in Virginia and Pennsylvania. And that's really important because that information can then be used for future research and survey efforts. And the National Trust is also going to use this information to help create a nationwide map of African American historic places. But we know truly that history and stories and projects like this one aren't necessarily about the sheer numbers, but instead of how we can recognize and elevate the places and stories of African American history. And so I want to highlight two outcomes that happened in Virginia as part of the phase one of this project. And the first was a creation of a multiple property document, or an MPD, as you see on the slide, which is a document that formally describes and recognizes the contributions of African American watermen in the seafood industry in Virginia's Chesapeake Bay. And while this document doesn't necessarily lead directly to places being listed on the National Register of Historic Places, it does provide a really important thematic framework and information that streamlines that official process. And then second, out of the phase one Virginia work, is that the Samuel D. Outlaw Blacksmith Shop was officially listed on the National Register of Historic Places on May 17th of 2023. And just as a bit of background to share the story, Samuel D. Outlaw was an African-American blacksmith from Windsor, North Carolina. And he constructed a blacksmith shop in 1926 and worked at that shop for more than 60 years during Virginia's segregation period. He produced specialized metal tools for watermen, for carpenters, for farmers, and community members throughout the Eastern Shore. And so this is listed on the National Register now. And currently the blacksmith shop is open. It's being used as a museum to preserve the legacy of Samuel's contributions to the Eastern Shore. And by being listed, this important history and legacy will be permanently recognized and honored. And with that, I'll hand back to Elizabeth and Jonathan to learn more about today's work.
Thanks so much, Kate. Please, if you haven't yet and you have any questions, please generously use that question and answer feature. So thank you, Kate, Luana, and Aurelia for that background. Just to provide some more information on phase 2, Jonathan and I are the consultants for phase 2. We together are Preservation Futures. Preservation Futures is a commercial historic preservation firm. We've been working very closely with the National Park Service and the National Trust on this project. Preservation Futures work includes cultural asset management for public and private institutions, interpretation of historic places and spaces, and we use preservation as a tool to support equity and resiliency in the built environment. So Preservation Futures prepares local landmark and National Register nominations, we navigate tax incentives, and we design creative interventions that develop audiences and engage communities. So as consultants on this project, and as the consultants, we are the folks that are creating and testing out different public engagement strategies, both active and passive. We're doing in-person events. We've done in-person events and we're doing virtual events. We aren't the ones that are deciding what sites are to be added. We're managing the process and we're also managing the information. And ultimately, like phase 1, we'll be providing information on the project to state historic preservation offices in each of the states where we're working. So one of the ways we are doing this is keeping a series of channels open throughout the project so people can participate in the project on their own time. So here you see we've got our project flyer and several ways in which you can virtually engage with the project. We've got I've got a wikimap up, which we will show you in a moment, but you're welcome to take that address down and go right ahead and sort of play around with it on your own. We've got a project-specific email address, cmi@savingplaces.org. And then we've got a phone number that you can text or call to provide information to the project. So it's kind of about just giving people as many ways as possible to provide information, get information for the project, and really participate in this initiative. Our flyer has all of this information. Oh, excuse me. In addition to a QR code that routes you to the project link tree. And that link tree includes links to all of the sort of the ways that you can engage to the project, including the savingplaces.org website. So some of the information is that we'll share with you is a little bit redundant, but it's designed to kind of give you as many ways as possible to engage with the project. So we've been working on virtual engagement. We've also had in-person events. Our first in-person event was September 2024. We attended the Alpha Kappa Alpha Zeta Omega chapter's Pretty Crabby Crab Boil and social event in Newcastle, Delaware. So we did a small tabling event there. We had the map open. People were kind of coming in and out of the event, sort of socializing, and they took flyers, talked about the project, and added sites to the map. So kind of a really casual way to engage with the project. Alpha Kappa Alpha, this was their first sort of crab boil, so it was very well attended. So we had a lot of folks telling us about sites, connecting us to things to sort of that the project surely didn't miss or shouldn't miss. And it was just a really nice sort of lighthearted way to engage in the project for the folks that were here at this event. And we were also, we registered as a vendor. So, as Preservation Futures and the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative, we did sort of pay for our place in at the event. And this is sort of a way to assist Alpha Kappa Alpha, their particular chapter, in sort of some money for scholarships that they were generating through the event. Our second event was at December 2024. This was at the Museum of Historic Annapolis. They generously hosted us on the first floor of their museum over a weekend in December. We sort of gave an open call for people to come out and talk to us and place site. We had a very large map of Anne Arundel County in Annapolis, or Anne Arundel County, where people could place place different sites with these different colored star stickers. Folks brought us in different pieces of ephemera, and really told us a lot about historic sites in the Anne Arundel County, which is one of our 3 pilot sites in phase 2. So the third engagement event is this one here, virtually. We've sort of worked with the National Trust and the National Park Service to, not only figure out different public engagement strategies, but also how those strategies work in different places. So within Delaware, we worked statewide. Within Maryland, we worked in Anne Arundel County. And then within Virginia, we are working in the county of Arlington and in the city of Alexandria. So what did people tell us about historic places at these public engagement events and through the mapping? In Delaware, we were told of the Rehoboth Beach, which is a site of maritime history. And we were told about sites like the Monday Club in Newcastle. The Monday Club is the oldest Black men's social club in the state of Delaware. It was founded in 1876. And these 2 sites sort of represent kind of different ways that history can sort of express itself through place. So the Monday Club, obviously, there's a historic building that is on the site. The Rehoboth Bay Marina is sort of more of a larger site without a specific sort of historic building on it, but it still retains that history and that narrative. So the project really is looking to kind of capture things as diverse as the marina and the Monday Club. In Anne Arundel County, Maryland, people told us about Crownsville Hospital and Columbia Beach through our public engagement event in person there. And in Alexandria and Arlington County, which we hope to flesh out a bit through this public engagement event, this virtual event, and then how everyone sort of utilizes the map going forward. We were told about the Green Valley Pharmacy, and which is the first Black pharmacy in Arlington, and Stratford Junior High School, which was the first public school in the state of Virginia to be desegregated in 1959. So the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative is looking for sites like this and more. So we're looking for sites of recreation, sites of education, a school, a neighborhood, even a natural feature. And all of these kind of go into the project and really sort of will give us an idea of what's out there and what hasn't been given the recognition of preservation or the resources of preservation. So, here's some information on virtual engagement, that wikimap map, the email, and the phone number once again, which we'll show you a couple more times as the webinar progresses. So now, flyer again. Now we're going to move into a mapping activity. So I will close the presentation and share my screen. This is our map. So our map is kind of central to the project. The map is really interactive. So, here we are in Maryland. Here we are in Virginia, and then over here we have Delaware. You can click on the sites and it will give you information that other people have added to the site. You can add your own information, add supplements to the sites that people have already added. And there's sort of 2 ways that you can do this. You can add a historic place via your email. So when you first go to the site. Let me refresh it. It will ask you for your email address. So you can use your email address to log in, or you can just go right ahead and continue to the map with as a guest with no email necessary. So it's fairly easy to add a site. You don't have to know the address, but if you do happen to know the address, you can enter it into this little this feature here. And there's also a satellite feature, which is quite great if you kind of want to get your bearings in terms of where exactly your site will be. So I'm going to go ahead and add a site here. I'm going to add the Cherrydale Drug Fair, which is located at 3815 Lee Street. Lee in Arlington. Okay. And the Cherrydale Drug Fair is a site of a historic sit-in that happened in 1960. So I'm just going to go to add historic place, go right to that address, and then this little pop-up window comes up. So you can just type in and then if you have a photo, you can upload it. I've got a photo of the historical marker, which is unfortunately too large, but we can resize that. Let's pretend that it's the right size. So we're going to upload the photo and then we're going to submit. So here is our historic site. We can submit it, we can cancel it, we can delete it, and then we can upload a photo later. And you're able to see other sites that people have added. As you can see, there's another one over here, the Stratford School. First public school to be integrated in Virginia. And then there's another 2 sites here. So you can add sites, you can add comments to the sites that other folks have added, you can add photos to sites on the map. And the information that we gather from the map, and the map is sort of central to the Chesapeake Mapping Initiative, will be the Preservation Futures, the National Trust, and the National Park Service will sort of look at that information and share it with each of the state historic preservation offices in each of these states. So thank you so much for listening to us and for attending the webinar. This is sort of the conclusion of the structured portion of our presentation, but if anyone has any questions in the Q&A or any sites that we can go ahead and we can add live. Jonathan, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Elizabeth, and hi, everybody. I've been monitoring questions that have been coming in on the Q&A and have been able to answer a few already. There was a question or two about, or there's someone pointing out an error in an address, which we will reconcile. I did want to point out and to clarify that this project is ongoing. So the purpose, the kind of core purpose of tonight's webinar is not so much to share findings, because things are still in process, as it is to share how we are doing the work of gathering recommendations from the public, both to keep the community informed, but also in the hopes that those in attendance either themselves have sites that they would like to add through any of our multiple channels, or know people who have sites that they would like to add through those channels and can pass this information on. I see some more questions coming in. So what I will do is try to read some of these aloud for either Elizabeth, Kate, or Lawana to answer. live. And if you have a site that you would like us to add live, and you want to pass that information to us in the Q&A, Elizabeth, I believe you can read that and add it live for the group tonight. So the first question is a very good one. This question comes from Jessica Kaplan, and it asks, do the sites have to have structures on them, or can they be just a place that had something historic in the past?
Wow, that's a great question. I can take a stab at it if that's okay with everybody. Preservation is it's really based on there being a building or a structure, and that building, the sort of systems of preservation. Oftentimes we're looking for a building or a structure that conveys history or conveys a historical narrative. And in the case of underrepresented histories like Black and African American history, often the sites are the building is no longer there, or in a preservation sense, the building has been altered, or perhaps the site is just not there's no building at all. So we're kind of at the moment gathering information on sites that have a building on them, information on sites that have no building on them, places that are bodies of water where recreation occurred, or there was a significant a significant part of commerce occurred on that body of water. So at the moment, we're kind of gathering everything and then looking at all of that data and kind of determining, what does that data say about these sites? Is there something within the structure of preservation that can kind of acknowledge the importance of these sites, even if the site doesn't have a building on it?
Great, Elizabeth, thank you. A couple more questions that have come in. One is, will the data be made available for use by the general public without having to filter through the various state historic departments? And maybe that's a question, Elizabeth, if we can't answer, maybe that's a question that National Trust can address.
Oh, absolutely. I can say that at the moment, the data that Preservation Futures has gathered through public engagement events, it's on the map. So we have lots of sites in Maryland, lots of sites in Delaware, fewer in Virginia. So at the moment, the public face of the data is right here on our wikimap. But I think a more detailed answer might have to come from the National Trust there.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I can chime in a little bit. The National Trust does have an interest in, as I mentioned, eventually nationwide creating an open data set of African American historic places. And so I think the answer is yes, eventually. I can't promise it'll be in the next couple of months, but we do come at this information with a spirit of open data, noting that this data doesn't exist anywhere else, and sometimes it doesn't exist in SHPOs, or it's cumbersome to get. So I would encourage you to reach out to the National Trust directly as well if you do have an interest in the data piece of it. And I think we can also work with you to understand your needs and be able to share a little bit better.
Right, and I see a clarification came in for that question, that the questioner was referring to data available for GIS mapping.
Yeah.
Maybe keeping in mind that that's an ambition of the project as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and we definitely, when I said that, yeah, it'll be GIS data. And we do, speaking of GIS, this platform, I know one of the questions is built in wikimapping.com because we liked its usability. But we do work in Esri, which is a GIS software. And so it's something that we can make available as service layers through that. I think the practical side is we need to have all of our ducks in the row at the National Trust before we're just able to wholesale release the information, but it is one of our goals long term.
Two operational questions, but that I think are important. One is whether the project is ongoing, or if not, what the deadline is for entering sites?
The pilot, I'm sorry, phase 2 of the pilot concludes in March. But of course, all the folks at the National Trust, there's a vested interest in this project. So this phase of the project will be concluding in March. So it's sort of the short answer, I suppose.
Great. Kate, did you want to add anything about the what happens to the after March and whether data will still be able to be collected on this portal?
Yeah, so I was just kind of in one of the answers I did add gis@savingplaces.org email, so
Thank you.
people please feel free to reach out to that. Yes, after March. So I think the portal will technically stay up. However, it won't be actively monitored. So I would certainly encourage entries to be submitted before then. If things are submitted after them, we can check it out, but it's no promise that it'll get included because we'll pull the data, I think, in March and kind of run with that data. So ideally, that would be a good deadline. But same thing is that if there's data that you'd want to contribute that simply won't be ready until after then, reach out directly because we don't want to lose the opportunity to include that. It may not just be through this platform.
Great. Next, we have a question about accessibility. And the question is whether a recording will be available after the webinar. And I can answer that. The answer is yes. We're recording the webinar and we will make a recording and a transcript available. So if you have registered ahead of time, then you should automatically receive a link to that recording and transcript. If for whatever reason you haven't registered and you would like a recording, please feel free to write us at any of the emails or call us at the emails or the phone numbers up on the screen now. And I do want to say that the reason that we have so many portals into the system, right? There's the map, there's emails, there's a telephone number, is to try to make the project as accessible as possible. So if you or if someone you know has a contribution that they would like to make but needs special accessibility accommodations, please let us know and we'll do everything that we can to meet them. Thank you. The next question is, are there plans to do meetings in Arlington and Alexandria with various historical and archaeological organizations and offices? A lot of work is already done. So maybe Elizabeth, you can tackle that
one. This is our public engagement event for Arlington and Alexandria. We are not doing any meetings, but we have been communicating with the city of Alexandria and various other organizations, letting them know that that this project is happening. And in cases across the two other states, people have pointed us to story maps or different GIS mappings, different GIS maps that have the same information. So we're looking at the information that we're receiving from this crowdsourcing activity, along with that information that we've been pointed to. So we are aware that a lot of this work has already been done, and we've been sort of sharing the results of our project, and then also taking in the information that people have provided us. So yes, we do acknowledge that a lot of organizations are doing concurrent work, and we are hoping ultimately to determine a way to acknowledge that work as well in this project, since the National Trust and the National Park Service are both a project partner.
So Elizabeth, there's another interesting question here that's a broader one, and then someone has suggested a site. So I wanted to pose a question from Rosemary Spell, who asks, and this is very interesting, particularly for this region, how do you account for changing waterway boundaries that have occurred in the past? This is not, to my knowledge, an issue that we've had to tackle directly yet with any of our sites, but I'm curious from a mapping perspective, Kate, if you have thoughts on this, and then maybe we can share some of ours.
Yeah, certainly. To be honest, it's not something we've considered yet as part of this project. I know there are historical maps that may help to see and visualize the waterway boundaries. We've not undertaken the digitization of that. So honestly, I would want to learn a little bit more about that and how it factors into, which I'm sure it does, into the history of this area, because I think it could be a powerful description or visualization if we do a story map, for example, or show some of these sites in different ways. And so the simple answer is we haven't accounted for that yet, but I think it's something that would be worthwhile to pursue and find more about.
Right. We have a site suggestion from Zuni Miller Matima. I hope that I'm capturing your name correctly here. Elizabeth, I've sent you the details also in the webinar chat. But Zuni is asking to add the historic Tolson's Chapel and School at 111 East High Street in Sharpsburg, Maryland, and would also like to see Washington County, Maryland explored and added. And so maybe we can mark down Washington County for later work. And if it's possible to add the historic Tolson's Chapel live, that would be that might be exciting to see.
Sharpsburg is outside of the
No.
phase 2 area, but I think that's we are, as Preservation Future, is going to be providing the National Trust and the National Park Service with a report on this project. And one of the things that we will include in our report is information like that. That there are areas sort of outside of the pilot area that people have pointed to us. So in future phases or in future projects, when people do suggest areas that are outside of the pilot area, how do we address those? So thank you so much for adding those. It would be wonderful to perhaps see Washington County explored during a future phase.
Right. Okay, there's a good question here about the question is the team available to give briefings directly to smaller groups? There are groups working with descendants of enslaved people who appreciate when projects like this meet them where they are at the descendants' availability, which is something we absolutely recognize. Elizabeth, maybe Elizabeth and Kate can both speak to this, because there's a limit to the phase 2 pilot and its ambitions and its resources. And then there are larger goals overall of the project that we might look to in the future. So there may be two answers to this. Yeah.
We're absolutely available to give briefings directly. We have given some short presentations to historic district commissions and different nonprofits. So we do have our emails up there. If you'd like to email either Jonathan or I about that, we'd be happy to give a presentation.
Great, thank you. Oh, Kate, did you have something to add? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can, and Luana might want to chime on as well. But again, recognizing that the project period for phase 2 is small, but this work is work that we're committed to. And I think that our goal long term is to empower local communities to be able to map their sites. And so I can see a small briefing or a small group like this who truly knows the history of an area are the people that we want to talk to populate a map nationwide. And so if this doesn't happen between now and March, I think it's still worth reaching out to the Action Fund or to our GIS team so that we can understand that a little bit more and be a part of those sorts of gatherings.
That's pretty much what I was going to say too, Kate. This is an ongoing project, and the work of identification and acknowledgement continues. So definitely, please feel free to reach out to us at the Action Fund, at the National Trust, and actually any of our partners. If there's a site that's meaningful to you that you feel should be included in the future as part of our mapping projects.
Thank you, Luana and Kate and everyone. There's one more note here in the Q&A. And I see also that we're coming up close to our 1 hour mark, and so I want to encourage anyone with a remaining question to ask it. But someone has sent in a link to a resource, an Arlington County resource, which is certainly very useful and we appreciate. And just wanted to take a moment to note that as Elizabeth nodded to, as part of our work, Preservation Futures will be delivering a comprehensive report on the pilot, and that will include, to the extent possible, a kind of compendium of existing resources that we've encountered in these counties. The goal of the crowdsourcing project is a little bit different, right? Which is not to necessarily, bring together disparate lists or databases, but ideally to capture sites that aren't on any of those lists yet, sites that maybe are yet to be recognized locally or nationally. So this is a useful resource, but we also hope that people on the call themselves or their contacts and networks can consider adding sites that may not have made their way already onto historic registers or records. I see. I see another note coming in saying this is a note from Robin Little saying that they are working on Our Roots Run Deep tours in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and that they'll be in touch about the mapping project, which is another great outcome of this kind of a meeting. We would love to hear from people, others working on mapping projects or on historic trails or other forms of compendiums of historic resources in other places. I think it's part of our effort also is to connect with those other networks and to learn from them and to share our findings with them. So thank you. And then finally, sorry, this is great, but a few more notes coming in, not a question, but a request from LaShawn Quandert Mosley, request to include the town of North Brentwood in Prince George's County, Maryland, the first township established by African Americans in Prince George's County. So again, with Prince George's County, we have some limitations because it's not on the map, but we can include it in the report. So thank you for that. All right. So with that, Elizabeth, do you want to conclude?
Yes, for everyone who's still on the call, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this webinar. Thank you to Kate and Luana and Aurelia for joining us. We have the flyer up with the map up. Please share the map and the flyer. You can hit that link, that QR code with your phone, and you can get all the information on the link tree. You can email cmi@savingplaces.org, or if you have specific questions about the project, you can email Jonathan or I. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we really appreciate your time and your participation on the project and all the great questions and comments and links that you've provided to us. So thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.